Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
Yeah, I was in tears. I was just like, that's the best, man.
Hey, Matt.
How's it going?
How we doing?
I'm good. How are you doing? How's your snowboard venture?
It was good. We had a nice fresh layer of snow, so it was good.
Awesome. Yeah, we got a bunch of snow down here in the desert. It's pretty awesome.
Right on. I heard you had a nice little snow run the other day.
Yeah. I'm trying to get a little run in every day, but yeah, it's awesome. There's like 5 inches of snow. Yesterday it was like bone dry. I was like slick rock running everywhere, finding these springs, and today it's just a powder blanket all over the desert. It's pretty awesome.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming on. I know personally you've been an inspiration to me for a long time.
You're an inspiration to me. Get out of here.
Thanks, Matt. But yeah, I think a lot of people understand, who you are now. But I think it's interesting to think about your story kind of before the spotlight and before the TV. Matt Graham, before he became what we now know as Matt Graham. So what was it from the jump that got you inspired? What kept you progressing your skills to the next level? What was it that always set that fire inside of you from the beginning?
Basically, I grew up exposed to the mountains and the beach as a kid. My parents loved both, so I kind of was spoiled in that regards. I felt like definitely had a good upbringing, so that helps. I was inspired enough when I was 17 that I moved to Yosemite Valley, and I just actually left school, and I'm like, I'm gonna climb. I just want to climb, be in nature, learn about the skills. I actually had I think 15 edible plant books. Like that was my library. So I went up there and I was like trying to figure out every plant, and I met some people that helped me along the way too. There was a curator at the museum that was really skilled in hand drill fire and cordage and different things like that. And then I would watch Lucy, who was a Miwok Paiute there. She was making baskets and would take obsidian flakes and was processing milkweed cordage. And so I got exposed to the skills quite early. And with those skills, the climbing and the nature connection, all that started to establish. I just felt like I wanted to dive deeper into the wilderness, and I was already an athlete. I grew up as a triathlete, so I started trail running and doing all these other things. And the trail running kind of gave me that sense of freedom of okay, I can get way out in the backcountry pretty fast, but how do I survive out here? Because I want to stay out here. So that's where the skills started coming into play. And on my weekends, I just started running in the backcountry with very little gear, just a little butt pack. At the time, we called it a fanny pack. And I'd stick a few things in there. And I just figured out how to survive, And sometimes it was good weather and sometimes it was bad weather, like snowstorms and stuff. And collect plants. At the time, I wasn't really into the hunting aspect, but I was very into the plants and teaching myself basic fishing techniques and stuff like that. And it really just grew from there. And my love for being on my feet, I think was a big catalyst for that. I basically ran all over California multiple times. And that just it led me into this path where I wanted to find a community of people that were doing this. So somehow I was just guided to Utah, where there was a survival school, and I met my tribe and started teaching these skills.
What always blows my mind about you, Matt, is that you're this incredible adventure athlete, but you're also an incredible intellectual. And in order to be in the woods and practice these skills, it kind of takes a balance of both. You have to have the wisdom and the knowledge, and then you also have to have that physical piece. And I think you, more than most people I know, have done an exceptional job at really mastering both of those fields.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's definitely a process of learning. I think I think as you get older, like I'm approaching 50, you know, I'm like almost 49. You kind of, you start figuring out the different phases of your life. I think in the beginning, like when I was maybe more your age in my 20s, like it was more about the push and the physical aspects. The skills were important, but you know, as I'm older, I feel like it's really important to keep that fire. I mean, the fire's still in there. Like I still feel like I'm 20 years old, honestly, but it's really important for me to like pass those things on. And uh, I'm at a phase in my life where like teaching is important, and I mean, I've learned so much, and I'm gonna continue to learn. But it's like it's at that sharing time of my life, I think.
Yeah, I can totally see that. With the trip I got to go on with you, you shared so much wisdom, and felt like I got to glean so much from all of your experiences. It was really cool to be there.
Yeah, no, it's pretty rad to have you out there.
Yeah, and my favorite part about that whole trip and the experience was that it hadn't been done, right? That it was kind of the first running of that type of trip. So I think that really meant a lot to me, and it was really cool to see how it all shaped out.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it was our first run of it. You know, what's funny is when I worked for Boulder Outdoor Survival School, I was doing all their hunter-gatherer courses, and I advertised this course, and we just called it the Primitive Runner because we didn't know what to call it. And I was like, oh, everybody's going to sign up for it. It's going to like book out right away. But for some reason, it didn't fill at that time. And I guess we're just waiting for the right opportunity to make it happen and have you be one of the first out there. And yeah, it seems like it's going well. We actually put up another one for May and just a couple weeks ago, and there's only 2 spots left. So I think we might keep running some more of these.
Right on. Yeah, it was a fun course, so that makes sense. So back to your path, what was it that allowed you to go from survival guide to TV? How did that path work out, and kind of what did that all look like?
Yeah, well, so I mean, during my teaching time in Utah for a good, you know, more than 15 years, I was teaching mostly a program called Boulder Outdoor Survival School, and then I had another program called True Nature Farm, and I was also guiding llama tours for older clients that couldn't get in the woods as well. And when I wasn't teaching, I was living as a hunter-gatherer. You know, I lived in natural shelters in the backcountry and would constantly push my skills. I'd go out every fall for about 40 days and just a loincloth and a stone knife. And I actually did a 6-month solo from winter solstice to summer solstice. And I used to migrate too. I used to walk from Arizona, southern Arizona in the winter times, and then back to Utah in March. And so there was all there's layers to the skills that I was learning and practicing. And I guess I got to a point when I was almost 40 years old where it was like this is great. I love this. You know, I could keep doing this forever. But I guess the creative side of me just wanted to figure out a different outlet to share, to present. And I also, it was kind of for a few different reasons. I also wanted land. I wanted to someday build a school, wilderness school. So I was trying to figure out, well, it's like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, maybe TV is a good avenue to make a little bit more money than $5,000 a year, which was my typical income at the time. So I went into TV, you know, and I was like, I'm glad I did. You know, a lot of people have mixed feelings when they do survival TV, but for me, it was a really good creative time in my life that I got to present to a different audience and present in different ways too. So it became this entertainment side and also like a comedic side, but I made sure that the skills were genuine and real. And you know, I feel like a lot of my audience got, you know, a good taste of what it means to be out in the wilderness.
Yeah, and what I've noticed about your TV shows is that you're typically coming from a point where you're emphasizing ancestral skills. it's not about the gear, it's more about nature connection and really using what you have around you in a creative way.
Appreciate that too. It's I feel like, I mean, I do use gear sometimes. I'm not opposed to it. I feel like the foundation for anybody in the backcountry always needs to be from a point of nature connection. And you get that connection the strongest when the gear is left behind. It's not that gear's not nice sometimes, and you appreciate it in certain circumstances. But if you're just always going to the gear, you're going to miss a step. You're going to miss those layers, and those layers are really important.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's backtrack just a little bit. When people, have asked me about you before, there's usually two things that stand out. And one of them is your run across California via the Pacific Crest Trail. Could you share some of that, how that came to be and what that was like from, being unsupported and sort of doing it on your own terms? What was that experience like for you?
Well, so I started ultra running when I was maybe 20, 21 years old. And I was a trail runner from the time I was 17. I started running up and back and forth up to Half Dome and doing a lot of mountain running. And I didn't even know I could ultra run. I just thought I was a really good 20-mile runner. I just assumed that like much more than that. Like I was kind of a muscular guy, so I assumed my body just wasn't built for that. But one weekend, after I made this commitment for the summer, I'm like, I'm not going to set foot in any vehicle, friend's vehicle. I didn't have a vehicle, but I'm like, I'm just not going to get in a vehicle. Feet are going to be my motor. And I went for a hike one weekend, a 3-day weekend, and I had my backpack on. It's a pretty big backpack, and I just started jogging, and I didn't stop. And I'm like, whoa, I just ran 65 miles today, and I feel pretty good. So I'm like, I guess I'm an ultra runner. And I ended up running 130 miles on that 3-day weekend, just cruising around the backcountry. And so that kind of fired like this new piece of my life. I'm like, whoa, if I could travel almost as far as most people drive, like what can I see? So I started taking these like smaller adventures all over California for a couple years. I went from Death Valley to Redwood Coast, Redwood National Park. That was one of my adventure runs, and just started piecing all these little things together. And then I'm like, well, I should run the whole length of California on the Pacific Crest Trail. And at the time, like, not only was I not very high tech, but I just couldn't afford nice gear. I couldn't even afford a super ultralight sleeping bag at the time. So I just generally went with a piece of cloth, and I had a bivy sack rolled up in there, and not much more. I had some seeds and sometimes a water bottle if it was necessary. And I just learned to push my body with no gear. And that's how I basically took on running the Pacific Crest Trail, the length of California. And I ran I ran up to the base of the Sierras. In the Sierras, I did mail myself. I had a sort of a bigger down sleeping bag and a little day pack because I wanted to sleep on top of the peaks because I just love that. So I through the whole Sierras, I slept on top of every pass or peak. And then when I got to the back end, I ditched it again and went back to my wrap and I just ran the length of California that way. I didn't feel like I beat myself up or was pushing too hard, but at the time it was one of the faster, probably actually the fastest time it had been run. I ran from it in 58 days self-supported.
You are an absolute madman, and it's such an incredible feat. But knowing you, it's, not surprising. And I said that there's two stories that always come to my mind when I think about you. The other story would be that kind of 6-month-long solo you did, which is another incredibly difficult feat in itself. Was this something that you had kind of dreamed up, or was it more at the drop of a hat and you just decided to hit the bush and end up staying out there a bit longer maybe than you had, or it's just always in the cards for Matt?
It was definitely something that had been burning on my mind for a few years, and something friends and I talked about too. It's like, oh, what would it be like to be out for a year, right? The problem with a year is that just taking that time away for various reasons is really hard to do for anybody, really. And I was teaching at the time, and kind of felt like I was teaching the same stuff over and over, and part of that was because of where students' levels were at, but a lot of that was where my level was at too. So I'm like, well, maybe a longer stay out will help, develop some of those skills and give me a refresher and a reboot. So in that coming year, I actually sat down with a piece of paper, and I wrote out like a bunch of the New Year's goals, and I can't remember all of them. I do remember one of the things I wrote was, I will stay out in the wilderness for 3 months straight. And I sit there and I looked at that piece of paper, and I'm like, that's too short. So I crossed out the 3 and I put a 6 on there. And and I felt like I should finish up my teaching season. So naturally that made the winter solstice like a good marker, a good time to start that journey. So going from solstice to solstice, basically.
What was the scariest moment of the entire trip?
Definitely when I thought I was starving to death. That came after maybe about 2.5 months. Like spring hadn't quite fully got there, but a lot of the plants and things weren't up. And I just, every day I was sleeping like an extra hour. So my waking hours were becoming really smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was so weak that I could barely lift myself out of bed. Just my body weight felt like I was bench pressing 1,000 pounds. Not that I could do that, but it just it was intense. I had this sensation that I was dying, and some weird things were happening in my body too. I hadn't seen a dentist in 8 years, and I was spitting out giant flakes of tartar out of my mouth for a little while. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird. And, combined with the sensation that I don't know what's going on. Maybe my teeth are getting ready to fall out, and, this is the process of death. I'm not sure. But it was scary. I honestly, I was at that time, I did bring in staples to start the journey. I had maybe 22 pounds of dried rations when I started in the winter solstice, but we're talking 2.5 months into it. So I was down to I'd been rationing 2 pounds of quinoa for a month at this point. So I was really getting very little calories outside of what I was collecting, and there wasn't much available yet. And yeah, I mean, I thought I was probably going to die, but I'm I really want to get through this. I want to feel what it feels like to get through it. I just felt like I needed to experience more. And after a period of 3 weeks of this extreme weakness and spitting tartar out of my mouth, my mouth returned to this sweet taste that it's kind of hard to describe. But I was if there's a girl around, she'd never leave me because she just want to kiss me. Kind of sweetness. It was really good. And I was basically getting off on my own mouth. And my strength came back. It literally came back over a period of maybe 2 days. All of a sudden, it just started returning really fast. And then I just felt strong and wild and efficient. I felt calories weren't as important in my body anymore. I felt I actually got through this breaking point where my body became really efficient metabolically. And I don't know the science behind it. I just know that that's what happened. And at that point, every little bit of wild food I started collecting, was amazing. And as spring came on, more and more food was available. So I was able to start hunting more and gathering a lot more food. And I felt pretty amazing after that.
During this trip, what was the hard skill that you feel like you leveled up the most? Was it hunting, or was it preparing wild foods? Did you become a lot better at making cordage? What was the hard skill that you really leveled up on?
I mean, there was a lot of things that I gained. I definitely gained a lot of plant. I want to say plant knowledge, but what I gained was how to make the plants I already knew about taste really good. Mm-hmm. Figuring out different ways to process them and mash them and make breads and pastes and different, things out of them and make my salads taste better, and all these different little tricks, that like you don't really learn until you're out there a long time. And then definitely the other hard skills I learned were my trapping and hunting. Increased a lot, and I learned a lot about myself as a hunter and the tools that were best for me. I at the time I was kind of equally hunting with the bow and the atlatl, and during that time I just assumed that the atlatl would be, or the bow would be better, and I spent some time with it, and I realized it really wasn't, and there was magic that was happening every time I picked up an atlatl. So I just started favoring it, and I started getting really skilled with the atlatl, and I started learning traps for bigger animals that were, became really valuable during my time out there.
And you are very skilled with the atlatl. And that was actually a question that we got was, is Matt ever going to make an atlatl that's commercially produced? And for me, I feel it's better to make your own atlatl, partly because you get to learn so much while making it, but also when you make it, you can adjust it and tailor it to your throwing style. So I'm curious, do you think that you've kind of figured it out, the science of the atlatl, and that you have kind of a best method? And do you think you'll ever, end up widely producing that?
That's a good question. So like, in my opinion, like a baton type grip where you hold it more like a club. Those style of atlatls work really well in survival situations because they're easy to produce, and they do seem to be what people mass produce today. If a lot of atlatl manufacturers kind of go that style. Here in the Southwest, what I found with my research, some might argue this, but I've seen it a lot in drawings and petroglyphs and specimens that I've looked at. The split finger grip was 2-finger grips was the most common, and it's the one that I've adopted. And the thing is, you do kind of have to tailor it a little bit to your fingers, and that takes experience to know what that looks like. The other part to that is that there's a little bit more snap that happens with that style of atlatl versus a baton grip. The spur itself has to be tailored to the specific type of grip. So there's a lot of mechanism to it that happens, and you can also get higher performance, like a slight degree of higher performance, maybe 15%, if you make the atlatl flexible and it's weighted and everything, and that flexibility has to be compatible with the weight and flex of the dart too. So they get the cool thing about atlatl is that it gets really, it can actually get pretty techy, like way more than a bow, and nobody's tapped that yet. At least on the market, I haven't seen anybody get something that's really high performance. And there is a part of me, like a creative side of me, that would love to see like this high performance atlatl where people consistently are throwing 200 yards at very high velocities. I think that's quite reasonable. Right now, if you buy a thrower online, you're barely going to get 70 yards throw out of it. But that we just haven't tapped it. The atlatl can be very, we know that, like, if you look at archaeology in my area, in the Southwest region, towards the later development of the atlatl, it started getting very technical and very flexible, and the weights were matching the darts, and everything was very precise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to try more variations. Definitely working on the 2-finger method. It's interesting how you can take the primitive technology and take it further in one direction or another. And I've often heard that the atlatl was mainly used for megafauna, right? The big spear, typically going for a bigger animal. But you typically attack small game with it in just the same way because you are so precise with the weapon.
Yeah, I think that sort of that saying where it might have been developed more because of megafauna, but I don't think it was necessarily specifically used because of megafauna. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If we look at history, basically, the atlatl it's still being used by some cultures, Inuits, some people in South America, some of the Aborigines, and it specifically here in the U.S. had been used quite extensively all the way up till 1,000 years or about 800 years ago. So, and the game was essentially, we didn't have megafauna there. It was still essentially the same as it is now. So that should tell us something. One of the reasons, or I won't say reasons, but if we look at timeline, the bow and arrow in the U.S. started to be developed more and more in the Southwest during the time of agriculture. So specifically, they actually were leaving their hunter-gatherer lifestyles, growing corn, had time to tinker, do other things. Maybe it was because of war reasons, but the bow started to have some favor at that point. But prior to this, I mean, the game was very similar.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really thought about it, on that timeline. So that's a great point. But you've also, experimented with lots of different methods, things like the rabbit stick, which I see you using quite a bit now. Explain that for some people maybe that aren't as familiar with a rabbit stick or maybe don't have any idea what that is.
I guess when I started primitive hunting, like a long, long time ago, so I was actually a vegan when I started all these skills. So I never really liked the killing aspect, but I do love the ability to go into a landscape, connect with it, and live from it. So at that time, like I really started to figure out, which tools work for me and which tools favored, my living circumstances. And I worked with the bow, the rabbit stick, with the sling like David and Goliath, and a few different tools, bolos. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm not gonna master like 5 to 10 different hunting styles and tools, so I'm gonna pick 3. And I chose at that time I chose the bow, the rabbit stick, and the atlatl. So those have been the 3 that I have experience with, hunting with, procuring food with. And so I've stuck with those. The rabbit stick for me is, I really like it because it's just one stick, that flies aerodynamically. There's like a simplicity in its allure. Yeah, so it's so fun. I mean, there's guys that can throw these things over 200 yards. And I think it's one of those tools that, just with a little chopping knife, you can whip out pretty quickly. And even without a knife, you can take a bent stick out on a stone and use it as a rasp and flatten it out pretty fast. And so it's a really cool tool. I haven't got a lot of game with it, but I like that I can run with it. And I've definitely procured some small animals and medium-sized animals. So I know it's a good tool. And I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm starting to go back into it and use it more. I'm hoping to use it a lot more this winter for rabbit hunting and things like that.
Yeah, that's about as primitive as it gets, right? Short of throwing a rock at an animal, carving a stick and using that's about as primitive as it gets. And, I get this question a lot. I actually, I didn't grow up hunting, and I think you and I have talked about this. I grew up as an avid fisherman, and I never really wanted to hunt until I wanted to stay for longer periods of time in the backwoods. And when people see people like you, they probably think hunter, but the reality is it's more about connecting with nature and your environment and being able to connect with the land and live off the land. And ultimately, it's about respect for the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm finding like there's been an increase in desire to learn primitive skills and primitive techniques, and some of that's through exposure to television from myself and other survival folks. And there kind of seems to be this sort of category, maybe category is a little rude, but I feel like a lot of survival presenters are like trying to film this elaborate hunt, and it's like they don't even really have experience with it. It's like they're just trying to get this notch under the belt that you can see or something. And it's not really about that. It's like you said, it's about the connection. And for me, like my whole life has been trying to find healthier, simple, less harmful ways to live on this planet, live in this body of this life. And that's where, that's why I became a vegan as a teenager, because I'm like, experimenting with that, I was like, okay, maybe that's lower impact if I'm in the city. And I think it probably is. But then I'm like, but there's still like things are getting transported. There's a lot of fuel. There's a lot of animal homes being destroyed, animals dying still with that lifestyle. So I'm like, well, if I live in the wilderness, which we've done for 150,000 plus years, how can I find that connection and still live kindly on the earth? And I have found that you can go into an ecosystem still as a hunter, still as a gatherer, and you can do it in a way that actually still maintains or increases the ecosystem there. Absolutely. And that's where we all need that knowledge and guidance, because if we have that, we can go out into the wilderness and not just destroy it. It's not about just taking, it's about harvesting and hunting in ways that actually help the productivity of the wilderness. And I've seen that happen in many places that I've lived for long periods of time.
Yeah, and you learn by doing. And my first time, being a part of that and taking an animal's life, I was already a young adult, and I kind of said something to myself that if I can't take the life of an animal, then from now on, here forward, I'm a lifelong vegan. And it was hard, and it's still hard every time I have to take a life. And I was very close to being a lifelong vegan. But every time I kill something, I kind of say that to myself because I never want it to become mindless. And to me, if it becomes mindless, it becomes dangerous. Killing becomes a sport at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be doing it for the right reasons. You have to be, if you're not doing it for the connection and the kindness of living on Earth, then you've got to kind of reevaluate what it is that you're doing out there. I noticed it's getting like super like cloudy and snowy out there, so it's getting a little dark. Let me try to get a little light in here. That's a little better.
Yeah, looking good.
All right. Speaking
of looking good, we've seen a lot of your Brazilian fans in the chat tonight, all saying hi and reaching out. Is there a special lady in your life, a girlfriend or anything like that?
Oh my God, you put me on the spot. I just started dating somebody. Yeah, just recently. I haven't had anybody steady for a little while. It's tough with my lifestyle.
Right.
I'd love that, but yeah, so far it's been, yeah, we'll see. This one's pretty awesome.
Awesome, man. Good to hear. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the TV stuff. I mentioned to you that, I'm not a TV guy, but I know you did Bushcraft Build Off, and I know you did Dual Survival. Which show did you have the most fun on? Which show did you get to go out there and you were just Matt Graham in your element having a good time?
They all had like an essence of like what I love to do. I think so. One of my first with mainstream TV was called Dude, You're Screwed.
Yeah.
And I loved my cast on that. And then some of the production folks I worked with were are actually still like lifelong friends right now. So that was just fun. Like, it was just sort of slapstick comedy, and we didn't take it too serious, even though the drops were kind of serious in a way. I mean, they were short, but we didn't get any help from, you know, the camera folks or anything like that, like people think. I think the one that I resonated with, that I really enjoyed recreating the survival scenarios, was dual survival, just because it was, I felt like every episode was so different. Like, that's what was really fun about it. Like, just like, I kind of felt sometimes, I mean, not that I was acting, but sometimes I felt like an actor, like being stuck in this movie, like, oh, this plane just went down, and how do you survive in this situation? And like, you know, it was cool. Like, I felt like Matt Graham, like tapping into MacGyver or something. And so that was fun. I really enjoyed this show I hosted called Bushcraft Build Off, because a lot of my friends came out, built these really cool shelters, and I had the poshiest job ever. I just got to sit there and just talk and host, and I didn't have to starve or suffer or go cold hungry. So that was awesome.
Yeah, that's big, man. And after we went and ran on our trip, I went back and I watched Dual Survival. I watched an episode, and you were with another gentleman, and you had some ideas. The other guy had some ideas, but, you know, they dropped you off in Utah, you know, and the environment you guys were in, for anybody else, that's like them getting dropped off in their backyard, you know, because you're so familiar and used to that area. I just felt like the deck was kind of stacked in your favor on that one, man.
Yeah. No, that was a fun episode for me, just because it presented things that I've been doing for my whole life, or half of my life.
Yeah, that's great. So let's pivot to another show, and this is something you and I talked about, you know, when we were in the desert. Would you ever go on the show alone? It's, you know, gained tremendous popularity recently, and folks are kind of saying that this is the show that really tests people. And I think we're all wondering, would Matt Graham go on alone?
Yeah, you know, I think that show's great. I've had quite a few friends that have done it, you know, so I've got to talk to them, hear about their experiences on it, and it seems like it's a really good production to be a part of, and kind of a no fuss show, or less fuss show, or, you know, it's pretty clean. Like, the objective is, you know, you've got this pack and you have some supplies, and how long can you last out there? I actually, a friend of mine, like, I think it was a year ago, he's like, I'm putting in for folks to be on alone. Do you want to be in? And I'm like, yeah, count me in. I'm down. But I never heard back from production, so I don't know. At that time I was totally jazzed on it. Was excited about doing it, and I guess I'd still consider it. I think at this point in my career and where I'm at, I might be a little more fussy about, like, what location they choose that year. That might be a determining factor for me.
Where would you want to go?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd love to see the show do something more, a little different, more tropical, or I mean, obviously I thrive in these sort of lush desert climates, so that would be an easier no-brainer for me. But some of the locations they've been in have looked great. Like Patagonia looked amazing. Yeah. And then I think there was one I saw where I'm like, I'll probably tap out after a while. I was down for that spot.
Yeah, they've done some spots that are pretty cold.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, they always throw them in going into winter time, which is cool in itself, because that is the natural process of preparing for that winter cycle. So you are getting to see a lot of maximum amount of skills, and it helps the show from continuing on too far, because it gets colder and colder and colder.
And to me, it pays, you know, homage and respect to the folks that actually live there. You know, you get to see what it's like, you know, during 18 hours of darkness, and see what the folks that lived there for thousands of years went through. And it's mind-blowing, and those folks, didn't have steel knives and 10 other items or anything like that. They just had what they made.
For sure.
That's awesome.
It's a good show. I have a lot of respect for the people that jump on that. I think a lot of those folks do have a lot of unique skill sets, and it's also just the show itself develops skill sets too. For my friends that have been on it, they've actually learned a lot being out on the show, just taking that time to be out with the wilderness, which is something we're losing more and more of. I feel like with the electronic age and the way we're sort of like different little avenues, like paperwork comes in and bills and taxes and all these things, it's hard for people to get away for very long, without feeling like they're shucking their responsibilities.
Yeah.
So a show like that kind of forces people to take that time, whether it's a show or not. I think it's a really good experience to go through.
And I think it's important for all of us to at least consider those words. What does life look like when you strip it all away, strip away the electronics and the superficial stuff? What does it all boil down to? What are the priorities that come out of those experiences? And I think, that was really the inspiration for the show from the jump for this show, was people that had stripped away everything and really figured out what their passion was and then turned it into their priority. And I think, honestly, you're a great example of that. With that said, your newest or one of your newest endeavors has been Surviving the Stone Age, which is a new show where you guys lived as a tribe, kind of just living off the land. What can you tell me about that show? If anything, I know some of it's kind of still hush hush.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a bit I can tell you about it. The show was inspired mostly by my friend Lynx. She's a Stone Age practitioner who's well known in our field for being an incredible craftswoman and really just spending a lot of time with the fine-tuned skills. Yeah, so she's been an inspiration to me. We worked together back in 2001, and we've been friends even before that. And she came up with this idea, or maybe we came up with it together. I'm not sure which, but we were like, we need, there's landscapes dedicated to particular activities. Like you go to a spot and like, that's the climbing zone, or that's the off-roading zone, or, this is the hunting zone, whatever. We felt like there needed to be land dedicated for people to do Stone Age living skills and connect with the land. I still do. I think that's I can't believe that doesn't exist. It's like the most fundamental aspect of being human, and we don't have lands dedicated to living off the land. Like there needs to be education around that. I know you can't just throw people out and say, go do it, but if we educate folks and then we monitor and let this happen, I think it could turn into something really beautiful. And so does my friend Lynx. So she was continually pushing for this. While I was just sort of talking about it, she was actually taking steps to make it happen and find people to present funding and talking to different organizations, state, government, public, private, all kinds of different avenues. And this production company from Great Britain got word of what she was doing, and they did a little piece on her and then really loved her, connected with her, and felt like, let's create a show. Let's make a show that establishes awareness for this. And so that's how this started. And like a lot of shows, it takes a long time to get the wheels rolling. So this show is in the process of developing for almost 2 years. They reached out to me about a year and a half before we actually shot the first episode. So basically it was a bunch of trips going to Bulgaria because it was a production company over in Great Britain, and they wanted to film in a European type setting and have Great Britons or a good British cast there. Yeah. So we found this place and got a group of great people together that had quite a bit of experience in their own avenues. And so we had 8 of us live together as a Stone Age tribe for about a month. I think it was like 3.5 weeks. And see how we fare, what we learn, document it, and basically create something that hopefully will establish some awareness around the subject of creating these wild lands.
Yeah, that's a dream I've talked about with my friends many times, and it's baffling, that it doesn't exist, that there isn't a dedicated space like what we're talking about. And it seems like at this point, there's just so many restrictions in America that it's hard to visualize it even happening. So it makes sense to me that you guys went abroad and, were able to make it happen overseas.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's something that needs to happen. It's really sad that it hasn't happened. And I think there's a lot of driving factors as to why we don't have lands like that. And some of it, a lot of it is around hunting regulations.
Yeah.
In a lot of, in a lot of states, a lot of hunting regulations get developed based on the norm, and also sport hunting seems to have the most funding. So they're sport hunters. You're usually just interested in the modern equipment, the guns, and the modern fishing gear. So they end up inevitably driving a lot of regulations in a way that kind of needs to change, because primitive hunting, it's hunting. It's hard. Like, it's not like we're going to go out with primitive tools and just destroy the forest. That happens with guns, and that's why we have those regulations. But we need those areas where people can practice these skills that are really difficult. Like, I know instructors that have made their own bows and hunting tools, and years go by and they still haven't even got their first animal. So there's no reason we can't educate and practice these skills, these ancestral skills that are the roots of all of us.
You know what else is crazy is just how much more fun it is. The process of building your own bow or atlatl, taking that same setup and having the skill to get within lethal distance of the animal you're hunting, with a primitive weapon that have been used by our ancestors for thousands of years. To me, that's much more natural and fun and really just appealing than sitting across a mountain with a scoped rifle and shooting an animal down from 300 yards away. I fully agree with you. It's like, those skills, because they're inevitably harder, we're learning, the process of making the tools and the stalking and getting close. And these are the true perceptive skills that we as a culture, as a society, that on the electronic age, we're losing those perceptive skills, skills, the visual, the nature connection. And those are important. They're important not only for what they obviously are, just having the ability to perceive and see things and do things physically, but they help us mentally too. It's important for our mental health. That's how we've been evolving for 150,000 years plus, and we take that away from us as a culture, we're not going to mentally stay together. We have to have that connection. We have to have that perception, and we have to constantly be doing these skills. Like if you took me and if I just stared at a computer screen for like I don't know, 8 hours a day, I'd go crazy now, but but at least I know I'm crazy. That's the difference. I wouldn't want to see Matt Graham after an extended period of time with a 9-to-5 job.
Craziness.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, let's move into what's next for Matt Graham. Are you going to write another book? I know you've been working on your personal school for a number of years. Speaking of, perceiving, if we're looking forward, what's next for Matt?
Yeah, the school is a big one. I don't see the I'm currently teaching. I teach maybe 6 classes a year at this time. The school that I'm developing is basically going to be like a wilderness village where people come and learn specifically from the village as a base camp. I don't really see that being up and running for maybe another 2 years, like fully functioning, but it's there, and it's a project that I'm working on right now. Yeah, I mean, continuing to teach, work on that. I do plan to write another book. I would also, I'm open to doing more TV, but at this point in my career, I'm looking more towards film, whether it's documentary style or I'm even interested in doing something that's like a fictional movie that's written really well based in survival, where all the skills are like top notch, but it's shot like a film, so we can make it look all pretty and everything. And I don't know, that's maybe it's a bucket list thing, but I just feel like that would be super fun.
Dude, that would be sick if you were the main character in like a survival based movie that was, made on film. That would be really cool. I'd watch that. So back to the school thing. Tell me kind of how this would work. Would people like live in this wilderness village, or would they come there for a week-long class? What would it look like when it was up and running?
Yeah, the school idea is, it's a little, I sort of see it as a holistic approach where I want there to be an element of like well-being and health and even fitness there. Like I see it as being like this primitive village that has like an obstacle course, a yoga deck, a climbing wall, like fun stuff. Like people come there and they learn primitive skills, but they also like get in shape and feel pretty good, during the week they're there. So that's kind of the idea. I mean, I see classes being anywhere from a couple days to a week or something like that.
That's really unique and super epic, man. If you ever need some help building that obstacle course, you just let me know.
You'll have to show me how to use it since you're the young stud nowadays.
No way, man. You'd still definitely smoke me. You're just a hustler. Yeah, so let's just wrap up with a few questions we haven't gotten to. But yeah, this is one that somebody submitted, and I thought it was a really good question. So what's your favorite place for an extended stay in the woods? And the caveat is that it can't be anywhere in southern Utah.
Like place like that I've been to? Is that what we're talking about? Or
yeah, of all the places you've spent time out in the bush, if you're going to do it, where would it be?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I mean, I will say that like I think to truly like know an area really takes more than a lifetime.
Yeah.
I don't think what I've done with my past 10 years of my life, where I traveled the world doing all these survival scenarios, is necessarily the best approach to like learning an ecosystem. I think you kind of got to find the place that fits you and stay with it. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, I grew up in Southern California, and honestly, that environment like really calls to me. Like I thrive there, but unfortunately it's just been built over. The wildness is like gone from it. So that's what got me searching for these other landscapes. If you said, I could have anywhere to survive, I definitely would have said Southern California 150 years ago. That would be ridiculously amazing. Like the plant flora and fauna there's like awesome. A lot of plants have 2 seasons. Like either you have the fish in the sea, and you have like just thousands of rabbits and deer all over the low coastal ranges that go into the ocean there, and seaweed, and it's just, yeah, it's an incredible environment. I feel drawn to those subtropical zones, but I feel like a lot of those subtropical zones just aren't wild anymore. So that's why I find myself in other places.
Yeah, right on, man. So one more question I keep getting sent to me is about you going on and competing and later beating Ed Stafford in the show called First Man Out. Tell us a little bit what happened there.
Well, yeah, I mean, First Man Out, I got a call. They're like, hey, Ed's got a show, and he's looking to compete against other people, and it was never meant to be like chest beating, like competition. Like basically it was presented to me like Ed's at a point in his career where he wants to learn different skill sets, and by bringing different people on, and he gets to kind of see how they operate, so to speak. In some ways, Mongolia wasn't really a fair episode for Ed from me, just because I have a lot of experience as an ultra runner, and Mongolia is just really big and widespread.
Yeah.
I think Ed probably, could favor in, a tighter knit forest or something like that. And, but it was a good opportunity, and it was super fun. I got to see like really cool aspects of the Mongolian culture and the landscape there. And, I enjoyed it, and I was honored to be a part of it. And, I would definitely do it again. It would be great to do something maybe more of an ocean or water challenge, or something that adds different diversity instead of just me doing a few skills and just running across the landscape, because that's kind of what I've been doing most of my life. So it wasn't really fair. Right. I mean, there's always something that could happen for sure, but I definitely had some confidence going into that.
Yeah, man, it seems like you got a lot of advantages on your side. You're physically talented, and you possess rare wisdom, and you're also just a kind-hearted individual that's inspired a lot of people, including myself. So yeah, Matt, I just wanted to say thank you for hopping on here. It's always a pleasure when I get to chat with you, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time we get to meet up again.
Yeah, likewise. I hope. I want to see you out on our running course next year. And we're looking at putting an elite course together as well. And we're working out details on that. So.
Yeah, right on, man. I'm definitely interested. I'm also interested in doing some kind of trip that's barefoot focused. I've been doing a lot of barefoot, especially in the snow lately. And I just think a barefoot trip would really be a cool wrinkle.
How long are you running in the snow barefoot?
Very short, but I walk in it every day. My goal is to maybe attempt the barefoot snow half marathon. The record was set by Wim Hof, and I don't know, maybe I can do it.
So it's like a record for barefoot half marathon in the snow?
Yeah, but I don't want you to know about it.
I'm not going to try to tackle that.
Watch, I'm going to hold the record for one day, and you're going to smash it.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. When I first before I got into ultra running, I used to run a couple miles daily in the snow barefoot in the springtime when I lived in the Sierras. But it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough, man. But Matt, again, thank you, so much for everything you do and the messages you share, the love you show to the community. And we all appreciate getting to hear your words of wisdom. And you, my friend, are indeed very, very wild.
Yeah, you too. Stay in touch, brother. Cheers.
All right, later, Matt.